BTC Takeover magazine. Vlad will take us through paradoxes and deeper layers of Bitcoin maximalism. Please welcome Vlad Costea to the stage. Take it away, Vlad.
Hi there. Happy 10th anniversary NiceHash. Thank you for having me. I remember last year when I was in Prague at another conference and I did a presentation, and Marco came to me after the event and said, you know, NiceHash is going to celebrate its 10th anniversary, which is really amazing. Thank you guys for providing infrastructure for miners to actually get Bitcoin, because there is nothing more cypherpunk than using your computer to get some internet money that you can spend somewhere else. And there is nothing more Bitcoin maximalist than actually getting Bitcoin even though you're mining something else. So thanks, NiceHash. And the title of my presentation is 50 Shades of Bitcoin Maximalism. And this was supposed to be animated and have lots of shades. It seems like it did not translate very well, which is fine. Do I get a remote or something for my slides? Anyone? Do I say next slide? Just a second. Do I have a remote for? Got it. So you're probably wondering who this guy is and why he talks so much. Well, I'm Vlad. I do a podcast about Bitcoin. I've become a Bitcoin maximalist in late 2017, and I spent the next 7 years writing a lot of articles and recording interviews. I consider Bitcoin software more than a religion, and I guess it's going to be obvious by the end of my presentation why that is. And I believe that we should get more features into Bitcoin, and to me that's what maximalism is about. It's not about saying, oh, this invention is perfect and we should use it as it is. It's about trying to get everything that's interesting on the free market on Bitcoin. And I still call myself a maximalist even if I research and use altcoins, which others refer to as shitcoins. Is Safe in here? She's gonna have a heart attack if he is. There are 3 pillars of Bitcoin maximalism. You have the cypherpunks and the computer nerds, and these are the founders. These are the ones that made it all happen. They adopted Bitcoin when it was worth nothing. They mined coins, they ran nodes, and they're basically the foundation of what we see today in Bitcoin maximalism. Then you have the Austrian economists, libertarians, and the finance bros, and they're the ones who saw potential in this monetary invention, and they built exchanges, they built companies, they made it possible for a Bitcoin economy to be real. And once you have these 2 layers of the equation, you're going to get cult members, religious zealots, groupies, and other wackos who join the movement. They show up after Bitcoin takes off, created post-rationalizations to justify the price going up, created memes, narratives, and podcasts. So, actually made this, which has in the middle the perfect Bitcoin maxi, which is a unicorn. You have Austrian economists and finance bros, you have cypherpunks and computer nerds and cult members and groupies and religious zealots. The intersections will lead to ideas such as the world's wealth will get divided by 21 million coins, which is Austrian economists converging with cult members. Then you're going to have Bitcoin is better than gold, which I think is the most reasonable statement from this. Austrian economists combined with cypherpunks. And then you get Bitcoin network plus the technology are more important than BTC, when you get cult members and cypherpunks getting together. Where does Bitcoin maximalism come from? I saw that Jameson Lopp is in the audience. He wrote one of the best articles about this. I recommend that you read it. The summary that I will be making, however, is only going to take into account some events from the history of Bitcoin, like the first mention of shitcoin, which comes from Bitcoin Talk. It was by a user named Rybak, and that dates back to November of 2010. So it was 14 years ago that someone actually saw something that is not Bitcoin and called it a shitcoin. Then you have OneCoin rules to rule them all from 2013 from Bitcoin Talk. This was a popular narrative at the time. It was just before the bull market, and at the time I think you only had like a dozen altcoins aside from Bitcoin. Then you had an article by Vitalik Buterin in 2014, And the context of that one is very interesting because January of 2014, after that massive bull market from 2013, you saw the emergence of two important protocols on Bitcoin. One of them was Counterparty, the other one was Mastercoin, which later became OmniLayer. And these two are trying to bring real-world assets on the Bitcoin network. This is where this whole idea of blockchain, not Bitcoin, comes from. That you're going to have anything getting traded on this very secure and resilient network. And Vitalik Buterin wrote this article because he was working on Ethereum at the time, and he published the Ethereum paper, and someone told him, ha ha ha, whatever you guys work on, we're gonna take it, make it better, and put it on Bitcoin. And that was, I think, the original Bitcoin maximalist idea. And it dates back to 10 years ago. There was resistance against Bitcoin 2.0, so the protocols that I mentioned, like Counterparty and Omni, there's a reason why they're not on Bitcoin anymore, because some developers were concerned that they're going to mess up the incentives by including other assets on the Bitcoin blockchain. So that's also a source of toxicity in maximalism. And there's also the ICO mania. Most people got converted to maximalism after getting wrecked on ICOs or NFTs. That was 2017 and 2021. Every bull cycle has its own class of, I don't know how should I describe them, utility ideas, like the ICO mania, the NFT mania. Now we have the meme coin mania. And a lot of maximalism is going to get created from it when people lose their money and they discover something that makes more sense and is more resilient. There's also the fight against big blockers. That's the Block Size Wars. There are at least a couple of good books about it. I recommend that you read them. And it's just infighting within the community on how to scale, and that's why today we have Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. And they both have different approaches and ideas about how to go forward. There was also the battle to keep BTC dominance high, 2017 to present, because at one point in 2017, Ethereum came very close to flipping Bitcoin, and people were concerned that it's gonna catch this network effect and it's gonna be more successful than Bitcoin, and some Ethereum bulls were saying, you know, Bitcoin is only going to exist on Ethereum, or we're going to tokenize it, we have WBTC and everyone can use that, and Bitcoin is obsolete. Of course, that hasn't happened, but a source of maximalism comes from this fight. And there's also Saylor's appropriation of the culture. And I don't want to talk too much about this. I want to talk about Mircea Popescu instead, because he's probably the first toxic maximalist. He was writing on a blog called Trilemma, and if Seyfettin is here once again, his book is mostly inspired, at least on the Bitcoin side, by the writings of Mircea Popescu. So you should look him up. He died in Costa Rica, allegedly 3 years ago. But he was the first person to call himself, I mean, no, he hasn't called himself a Bitcoin maximalist, but he acted like one. And he's quite a character. Look him up. So why does Bitcoin maximalism make sense? Well, because Bitcoin is the most secure, time-tested, and resilient money network on the planet. That's very reasonable. Bitcoin has a strong brand and millions of users around the world. That also makes sense. If you invent something better, it's unlikely that it's going to get the same success as Bitcoin, because it's been so many years and there are so many users of this network. You can't have a separate currency or token for every merchant or use case. It's inconvenient and cumbersome. That's a universal truth. You don't want to pay with grain coins when you buy bread. You don't want to pay with milk coins when you buy milk and stuff like this. With sidechains, rollups, layer 2s, and some software upgrades, Bitcoin can do everything. And that's something on which I like to emphasize, because that's sort of the point, if you ask me. That's what Bitcoin maximalism should be like. And I'm going to follow this recurring theme during my presentation, and always highlight actual maximalists. So you can see Eric Voskill and Amir Taki, they built with Bitcoin, which is a code, it's a client of Bitcoin which is parallel. It runs in consensus with Bitcoin Core, and it's written from scratch in C++ with other optimizations, and I think that's also Bitcoin maximalist. Why is Bitcoin maximalism unrealistic? And I put a picture of Max Kaiser, CEO of Maxcoin, and fan of Dash, who nowadays says he's Bitcoin only. So, Bitcoin is open source software just like Linux. You can't expect people to not play around with it, with new ideas for it. Bitcoin improvements require testing, both technical and economic. So you can't just put something on Bitcoin without testing it, because right now I think it's worth like $1.5 trillion, and you don't want to mess with that. So it's easier to just put it on Litecoin or Dogecoin or whatever, see how it works, see if it breaks or not, and then propose it for Bitcoin. Altcoins are sandboxes for new ideas that a Bitcoin testnet can't include, which require financial incentives to perfect. It just describes my previous point. Bitcoin is also more conservative and will never do everything that market actors invent. And this is a sad reality for Bitcoin maximalists, because of course the real ones want everything to get built on Bitcoin. Unfortunately, it will not be the case, and there will always be this, I don't know, avant-garde idea that will not get traction to get included on a Bitcoin layer. And humankind has never had a single universal currency. We have to wake up to that. I don't think infinity or everything is going to get divided by 21 million. We're still going to have gold. We're still going to have other forms of money. Government money is not going away. Even under a Bitcoin standard, they're going to issue their own national currency on the Bitcoin network. So we have to be reasonable and understand how the world works. So how can Bitcoin maximalism work? And I put a picture of Paul Stort's creator of drive chains. I'm a big fan of the idea, because it's this concept of bringing everything to Bitcoin with sidechains. And one way for it to work is to integrate every use case on the market, thus draining altcoins of their legitimacy. Because when you create an altcoin, you say, yes, I did create monetary inflation, I did put this money on the market, and I do ask you to buy it from me. And the reason is that Bitcoin cannot do this. But if Bitcoin can do this, then there is no more legitimacy for these projects to exist. So that's my first point. The second one is that Bitcoin scales and becomes fungible, so that it stays affordable to use and its transactions are more private than anything banks can offer. That part with banks is actually relevant, because if I send a bank transfer, it tends to be more private than something, let's say if I transfer coins from Kraken to Coinbase, that's far less private, because you're gonna have the transaction registered on a public ledger, and both Kraken and Coinbase know who I am, and the blockchain analysis company is gonna know who I am. That's forever on a public record. Banks can actually delete records. Of course, it's a crime, but they can do that. There is a technical difference between how this operates, and it would be nice if Bitcoin had actual good privacy. Adoption follows the technological development, and that's a truism, I guess. And that's how maximalism can work, and the price keeps going up. This is, I think, the most obvious one, and the one that we try to deny usually. We say, oh, we don't care about price, but it's what brings more people to Bitcoin, for better and worse. Here, we have a picture of Jimmy Song before he started wearing his cowboy hat. He was wearing this very nice t-shirt with Bitcoin and Litecoin and Decred and Monero. You should ask him about this today and see what he says. So, how will Bitcoin maximalism die? Well, maybe someone figures out a much more elegant solution to solve the double spending problem without blockchains or servers, then launches the new money system on the internet just like Satoshi. That's something that we're still not taking into account, because Bitcoin is built with technology from the 90s and early 2000s, in terms of cryptography, I mean. If someone figures out a better way without blockchains, which are slow and inefficient, to solve the double spending problem, then it's going to be something much better and more efficient than Bitcoin. Of course, we're going to see how that can stay decentralized and solve the trilemma, but it's not out of the question. Bitcoin ossifies too early, doesn't adapt to the demand of users, then loses dominance while other networks step in to fill the void. That's another way for Bitcoin maximalism to die. So if Bitcoin remains the same way as it is today, there's a lot of legitimacy to say, yeah, but Bitcoin cannot do this, and therefore we're going to be using Ethereum, we're going to be using Zcash or Monero and Litecoin and whatever. There's a lot of reasons to say that you don't want to use Bitcoin if Bitcoin doesn't do it. Bitcoin maximalism can also die for practical reasons if the culture shifts towards a multi-coin mindset with bridges between networks. And this seems to become a reality nowadays with stuff like Build on Bitcoin, BOB, which is a layer on the Bitcoin network which bridges with Ethereum. And there's also Jeff Garzik, who was one of the first Bitcoin core developers. He's working on Hemi, which is a bridge between Bitcoin and Ethereum. There seems to be a trend to create bridges between coins, and I think this can lead to a major culture shift and destroy maximalism the way that we know it today. Also, another way, and the most obvious one, is if the price doesn't go up according to expectations, people are gonna say, you know, Saylor lied to me with his triple maximine, I'm into debt, I'm not getting the returns I expected, you know, I'm disillusioned, this technology does not provide me number go up. Real maximalists. I have a two-part section with guys who are considered to be shitcoiners, but they're actually real maximalists. Vitalik Buterin, you might not be aware of it, but back in 2011, he was writing about Bitcoin and someone was paying him 5 BTC per article to write that, and that was like $3. He started Bitcoin Magazine and maintained a repository which was in Python, which is Pi Bitcoin Tools. He worked on Dark Wallet, which is something for which he doesn't get credit, with Amir Taki, and it was the first Bitcoin coin-join wallet. He co-authored Colored Coins, which is something on Bitcoin to put real-world assets on the network, then went on to explore smart contracts for them for Ethereum. He invented the term Bitcoin maximalist with an article that he wrote back in 2014. And he's always been interested in writing about Bitcoin on his blog. If you like him, you can argue that he built a network which generated research and development for Bitcoin and kept some experimental use cases away from Bitcoin. If you hate him, you're going to argue that he's the king of shitcoiners who built the anti-Bitcoin because it's more centralized and does some things in the exact opposite way. But no matter where you stand, WBTC, which is the wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum, has 15 times more coins locked in than Lightning and Liquid combined. And he maximized what you can do with your Bitcoins today. I mean, it's not him, it's whoever did WBTC, but Ethereum helped with that, and he doesn't get credit for actually helping Bitcoin. He's a villain in the Bitcoin culture. And there's also Zuko, Wilcox O'Hearn, and he's an OG cypherpunk, he worked with David Chaum on eCash in the 1990s. He wrote a blog post about Bitcoin a few days after it was launched, and his article was added to bitcoin.org by Satoshi Nakamoto. And that's a pretty big deal. He was on Bitcoin, and he was interested in it way before most people, and he understands how it works, and he saw some posts by Satoshi Nakamoto on Bitcoin Talk about zero-knowledge proofs, and he decided that he wants to pursue that to discover how he can improve privacy and scalability for Bitcoin with ZK proofs. Zcash was launched 8 years ago in 2016, and I think today it's the most influential privacy project because Bitcoin is getting ZK rollups, Ethereum is scaling with ZK proofs, Monero is improving its anonymity set with ideas taken from Zcash, and with mature ZK proofs, Bitcoiner can sync full nodes within seconds, transact with privacy, get much better scalability. It's still very avant-garde cryptography, but I think it was pushed forward and it was advanced by Zuko and his contributions. And it's not just him, but he's like the poster boy for this movement. The ugly truth is there are only two ways to improve Bitcoin: if you upgrade it with hard forks, soft forks, and code-based refinements, or if you use altcoins. And you can think of Bitcoin as this Linux environment where every fork is a way to build something for a different set of users. I only have 30 seconds left, so I'm gonna skip through this. I'm here to also show my podcast, so you can raise your phones and scan this QR code if you want to check out what I do. Oh, it's impressive how many of you are doing this, thank you. Like hundreds. And I also want to say that I'm currently outperforming Bitcoin with my privacy coin portfolio. I just wanted to show off a bit at the end of my presentation, because there's this Bitcoin maximalist narrative that says it's impossible to outperform Bitcoin. And I'm gonna end with this quote from Bob Dylan, who says, "Don't follow leaders, watch your parking meters." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vlad. Thank you. That was spicy.